Welcome to Black and Gold Digital Edition, a behind-the-scenes look at your Pittsburgh Steelers.
Welcome to Week 17's digital show. I'm Jay Puskar alongside Mike Fenner and Kent Urbanski. And gentlemen, before we start, it's got to be a huge blessing for the NFL to finally get through this portion of the season. I never even thought we'd make it through Week 5, but here we are, Week 17. Ken, are you surprised with how the league was able to handle COVID-19 and getting all these games in?
Yeah, a victory in itself, don't you think? At the beginning of the season, we were all thinking, maybe if this goes half the season, 10 games at most. But here we are, Week 17, and I think you've got to take your hats off to the NFL for the great job with protocols and COVID protocols that they in placed, and it's worked. There's still some issues with it, but they're getting the season in.
And Mike, what can you say about the Steelers organization and their communications department working with the media members, including ourselves, and just being able to help us out, be able to cover this team and be able to share the stories throughout the course of the season?
Oh my goodness, they are just the best. It's been such a struggle, and that was talked about in the last media session, just in terms of the appreciation that we all have collectively for all the efforts that they've done. We've gotten so used to all these Zoom calls, and hopefully it's a thing of the past come next season. But for now, it's been really a pleasure and a treat that we haven't been completely cut out of that access, and still being able to get a feel for these guys week in and week out. And it's certainly not the same, but hey, we've adjusted, and we certainly are appreciative of that ability to be able to cover the team this year.
As for the play on the field, Kent, boy, better late than never. The Steelers finally waking up in the second half against the Colts in Week 16. Coming back from a 17-point deficit, and they were able to beat the Colts, clinch the division. I mean, how huge was that, not only to win the game, but try to establish some of that momentum that they had earlier in the season?
It was like a two-quarter dosage of cure-all depression for Steeler Nation. It was unbelievable, and I think it caught everybody watching that football game by surprise. And it reminded me of back when the Steelers were playing in Super Bowl 14 against the Rams, and you heard the sideline audio from Chuck Noll talking to Terry Bradshaw saying, "Terry, the only way we're going to beat these guys is to go deep." And it seems like maybe Tomlin had that same conversation with Roethlisberger maybe at the half in that Colts game, because they opened it up, and man, what a difference.
And Mike, all it took was one play in that third quarter from Ben Roethlisberger to Diontae Johnson, and that really sparked everything. Even though they, the previous drive, they were shut out on 4 downs, but they came right back, and that really got them going.
It was funny. I just felt like on that 4th down, it was such a deflating play not to get points there. You kept wondering, should they have kicked? Was it the right call to go for it? But then ultimately, it's like, okay, kind of like what Tony Romo pointed out on the broadcast. If you can get this 3 and out, it's a big ask. But if you get it, you're going to have good field position, and maybe that creates that momentum you need. And those timely stops at the beginning of the second half were huge. I mean, just the red zone sack that creates the field goal opportunity instead of the touchdown for Indy keeps it within reach. Then you get that stop, the 3 and out after the failed 4th down. And as soon as they get that bomb to Diontae Johnson, just felt like the entire game turned upside down. And you look at the clock, hey, there's plenty of time. Down 10 now instead of 17, not 21 or even worse. So I'm really impressed by the way the offense woke up, but I think the defense really had a huge hand in that as well, where they really stepped up big on those stops.
What was the total yardage? 68 yards or something like that total in the second half for the Colts.
Yeah.
They really that Steeler defense really shut them down in the second half, and they made Indy change their game tactics, and they had no adjustment for what the Steelers did, opening up and throwing the ball deep.
Kent, we in the media and even the fan base has been so concerned about the lack of running. I mean, they are getting the carries, but the production just hasn't been there. Are the Steelers almost content with, hey, our passing game will set up the running game? Because it even seemed like in that Colts game, they worked a lot of screen passes and allowed James Conner to get into space, make some plays.
Yeah. I mean, so it's amazing what happens when you catch the ball. And so with the Steelers, yeah, they're not going to change what they do automatically Week 17 and try to be a run-first team. It's just not going to happen. But what throwing the ball deep does is loosen that defense up a little bit, so you can run the ball a little bit more and maybe have those short screen passes to James Conner, like you saw against the Colts. That's where he's at his best. And if they can do that, defenses in the playoffs have to respect that. and maybe it opens things up a little bit more for this offense going down in the playoffs. I think it's going to be exciting to watch.
Mike, turning the page now to the regular season finale against the Browns. The Steelers already clinched the division. At worst, they're going to be a 3 seed in the playoffs. Mike Tomlin has already said that Ben Roethlisberger is not going to get the start. He's going to get the rest. Other players also getting some rest going into this matchup. But for Cleveland, they still got to win to get in. And if they lose, they're going to keep their fingers crossed that other teams falter and they can kind of get in by the back door. But as far as this matchup is concerned, how does Pittsburgh handle this, and what would be their approach?
Well, first of all, you're going to see the rest from, of course, Ben Roethlisberger. We knew that early in the week. We pretty much knew that after the result of the Colts game. You're also not going to see Marquise Pouncey, Cam Hayward, T.J. Watt, guys that are valuable, veterans, older guys, leaders, and then T.J. Watt being their most important defensive player. Honestly, you want to see what the depth is on this team, with some of the guys that you're not as certain with. You want to see what the end of that roster can bring to the table, get those reps, see what they're made of. Pardon me. And if they...
You're getting all choked up about this
I know,
matchup.
exactly. Yeah, very emotional time. And if they are able to get a win, it's kind of gravy, because you don't assume that Buffalo is going to take the foot off the gas playing Miami. Of course, the Steelers move up to the 2-seed line if Buffalo loses and Pittsburgh gets the win. But you just want to see them play more sharp on offense and build off of that second half, even though they're not going to have Roethlisberger out there and they're going to look to Mason Rudolph. And you never know what can happen in the playoffs. There's been plenty of times where you see a scenario where you need a backup to come and rescue and save the day. And let's be honest, 608 passing attempts for Ben Roethlisberger. Probably the most surprising stat across the entire National Football League this year after the reconstruction to his elbow. 608 attempts. They're 12-3. I mean, this is unbelievable stuff. So
With a repaired arm.
yeah, it's crazy to imagine that could be possible. So well-deserved rest for those guys. That's the most important part. But really, just you hope you can kind of keep your P's and Q's offensively and stay sharp.
Kent, the Steelers they're no strangers to being in this situation. If I recall, a few years ago, they had to go up to Buffalo. Buffalo needed to get a win to possibly get in the postseason. Pittsburgh had everything locked up. They had like their second and third string guys go out there, and they still beat the Bills. Is that a perfect scenario for Pittsburgh to get these guys and have those guys get some reps, especially Mason Rudolph, who really didn't see a lot of action this year?
I think it is, especially with a 9-point spread. That just has ups, all over it. Just has wouldn't it be just ironic for the Steelers to go in there and keep the Browns out of the playoffs with that? I mean, I think what you're going to see is a lot of runs. They're going to try to run all day, especially with a lot of those wide receivers maybe still coming off COVID. You're going to see them try to attack the Steelers that way. And with Mason Rudolph playing, look, Mason's got something to prove. He's I think if anyone in this game that this game is important to, it's important to him to show what he can do. So I'm looking forward to it, even though it doesn't mean as much to the Steelers as it does to the Browns. I think it's still going to be a matchup that bragging rights, so to speak, are on the line here for both teams, both fan bases too.
Sorry, Ken. In this game last year in Cleveland, Nick Chubb broke the 1,000-yard mark. Last 1,000-yard rusher before that was Peyton Hillis. That was significant. Chubb didn't play in this first matchup this season, which was a 38-7 blowout win in Pittsburgh. So I think he's going to be excited to get back out there and play. And then Myles Garrett, has not been the same player since getting that positive test for COVID-19. He's talked openly about how much of a struggle that was, what he went through, and that he really is still trying to get back into game shape and does not feel like the player he was earlier in the season or that he's accustomed to being. So
Winded.
That's another guy that's trying to kind of get back into game shape as well. And they really need him to try and get to as high level as he's capable of producing with.
And look, I think both teams are going to be on their best behavior in this game too. You're not going to see anything crazy, especially with playoffs on the line. They don't want any chance of suspensions or anything like that. So all the extracurricular stuff is gone. I think that's just going to be a good, clean football game.
Mike, Kent made a good point about Mason Rudolph and just looking forward to the future. Is this a really good scenario for Pittsburgh to see what they really have in the future? Because let's say Ben comes back for one more season, but there's no doubt beyond that who the next quarterback will be. Is this going to be their benchmark test and just really kind of see what they have when it comes to drafts and even free agents down the road?
It's a good barometer and a good measuring stick because it's against a team that is they need to win. So it's not like Mason Rudolph's going up against a team that has nothing to play for, a team that's got something locked up. I mean, it's going to be a great test to see what he can do against a quality defense, a good defensive front, and a team that desperately needs to win. And who would have thought, by the way, that of all the AFC North losses Pittsburgh would have going into this final week, the only AFC North loss would be at Cincinnati of all the matchups. They have a chance to sweep Cleveland. They already have swept Baltimore. They won at home against the Bengals. So it's just crazy that that was the one blemish on their division record. You never know how it's going to go.
Finally, guys, Kent, going into this matchup with the Browns, what do they need to do? What do you want to see out of them, knowing that a lot of the starters, the big superstars, not playing in this game? What would be a big takeaway for them going into the postseason?
I'd like to see Mason have a good game and get the critics off his back a little bit, and to try to establish a running game. And we've talked about it before that Week 17 is not a time to do that. They're not going to change what they do. But, you're going to see a heavy run dosage of plays from Cleveland. So I'd like to see the Steelers counter with that a little bit and like to see what these defenses are all about, especially some of these backups that don't normally get playing time. I'd like to see what they can do.
Mike, what about you?
I want to see more from the offensive line, maybe some depth there, and then just kind of see some more pass rush without Cam Hayward out there and see what they're able to do even without their wily veteran that so badly needs a week off, and talked about missing the bye this year. And for guys like him, Marquise Pouncey, T.J. Watt, Ben Roethlisberger, they so deserve the rest. So want to see who can step up. All
right, guys, as always, nicely done. And hard to believe we've made it to Week 17, and better yet, we've got the postseason on the horizon, and we look forward to talking about that matchup when it's all determined come next week. So for Ken Urbanski, Mike Fenner, I'm Jay Puskar. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for watching. Join us again next week for Black and Gold Digital Edition.